this boyfriend, like, did he live here? He did like a month's worth of living in here for like a week. You can tell a lot about a man about the way he keeps his garage. I just said that for shits and giggles. I don't actually know if there's anything true about that. But it sounds like something you'd see on a wall in a garage, just like on a wooden plaque. Like, you can tell a lot about a man by the way he keeps his garage. For instance, my dad has incredible ADD. He will admit that himself. And I love him dearly, but he had a storage room in my childhood house growing up. And it was just a room that my mom and I didn't really try to go into ever because it was kind of frightening. He didn't, I mean, to him it was organized, you know, he had his own system, but it was basically just shelves like this, but like just piled with like this, but in a pile. And it was like a wraparound room of shelves like that, and then just like boxes on the floor and stuff, and like we didn't have any bikes back then. Back in my day, we never had any bikes, but and there were always spiders. Always so many spiders. Specifically, brown recluses, which are disgusting looking and also terrifying in that they're actually deadly and poisonous. We just see some giant leggy mass cross the room, and we'd just both go, "Oh my god," and kind of run away. Oh, people, come on my stream. It's so boring to stream to no one because I don't have anyone to like talk to and like hear stories from and stuff. Sad. Oh well. The winters are hard and there are no radiators in my house. No radiators? What are you talking about? There's a radiator right there. So it's winter. It's windy and cold outside. And I feel a breeze. I'm not a draft. A draft implies it's just like a soft, like whoo, like whoosh, whoosh in your face kind of deal. But no, like a breeze. Like the hairs on my head are moving from the breeze, and I look around, and behind me, in the corner of the living room, there is a gap between the two walls, like I want to say 2 or 3 inches wide. And you can see into the interior of the wall in that gap. And through that gap is coming all that cold winter air. So I was like, okay, cool. No wonder we have so many bugs, because we had like a good jillion bugs. I promise I'm getting to my story, you guys. I'm so sorry. Okay, story time. Get it done, Lindsay, or you'll never, ever finish it. Basically, it snows the first time. We all wake up. It's 65 degrees in our apartment. 65 degrees. That's the temperature. So we're like, oh, clearly we just forgot to turn on the heat. That's obviously what happened. So we turn on the heat and go about our day, go to class, come home, go to bed, wake up. It's 62 degrees in our apartment. And we're like, okay, we've turned on the heat. It's technically cranked up to 80 degrees, but the temperature is falling. So we finally got a hold of our, frankly, mediocre landlord at the time, because what college landlord isn't kind of mediocre? And he was kind of like, okay, I'll come take a look. So he came and took a look, and he couldn't fix it. So he like had to call in a specialist HVAC guy, and he comes in and takes a look. And then he's like, I'll be back tomorrow. So he came back the next day, and I remember leaving for class at 8 a.m., and I got back at like 3. He was there for like 8 hours because he had to literally rebuild every part of our heater. He had to rebuild a new heater for us. So after that we did have heat. But part of us, we also were like tiptoeing around the house, like this is a MacGyvered heater. Are we gonna is it gonna blow up? Are we gonna die? Like, okay, paint with the colors. I'm just gonna start painting. Kind of glad no one's watching right now because I'm thinking, but yeah, so a lot of the Japanese slang I know is just slang because, you know, after World War II, is what happened to my grandparents. They didn't go to the internment camps because they were a part of the first wave of that voluntary evacuation. So they packed up all their stuff in trailers and just hightailed it across the country and got whatever house they could in Colorado. And I think my grandpa said they took up jobs like bagging potatoes and being corn huskers or something. For quite a while. The only non-white kid in his school at the time. And the reason you don't hear about this voluntary evacuation is that they only got it was such a small number of people. They only transplanted or evacuated, whatever you want to call it, forcibly moved a small number of people. But then the hostility that met these families when they reached their destinations in the West US was just so vehement and hostile that it wasn't entirely safe for the family, you know, for the people who were being transplanted. You know, you can always Google those images of like, no Japs in this town and, you know, all that stuff. That's been the story of many people throughout the entire world. Not saying we're special, but... So after that is when Executive Order 9066 came along. And that was the order that sent people specifically to internment camps in, like, refurbished, I use that term loosely, refurbished, you know, horse racing tracks and stables, things like that. But anyway, my whole point in this is, so the reason I don't know Japanese and my mom doesn't know Japanese is because there's a weird divide between the small percentage of people who got voluntarily evacuated in the first wave before Executive Order 9066 and the people who did get sent to internment camps, because the people who were just voluntarily evacuated to, you know, not voluntarily, but just voluntarily evacuated, were met with all this hostility, and the pressure was greater for them to prove that they weren't Japanese. You know, they didn't have that community anymore of other people like them. So there was a lot more pressure for them to feel like, okay, we need to, like, blend in, we need to, you know, no Japanese, just English, you know, we go to church, we don't say we go to the temple, things like that. Whereas the people in internment camps, and by the way, some people get into this argument, and I hate it, of like, oh, who had it worse, the people who were evacuated and the people who were put in internment camps, and I'm like, you can't, it was all bad, every time, all of it, and I'm not gonna bother comparing it, because it just shouldn't have happened, period, for either group. I'm not gonna sit and split hairs on who had the most suffer points. You know, it's the same reason I don't like it when people compare the internment of Japanese American citizens, to the Holocaust, because you can't compare them. They were very different events, but both were horrific and really shouldn't have happened. You know, I don't really see the point in competing to see who's got the most, like, I honestly like to say, like, almost privilege via suffering, But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself here. So the people who were sent to the internment camps, you know, had lost so much. You know, they had lost homes and their finances and their assets and their community and their close relatives and a lot of their dignity, you know, a lot of just so much stuff. You know, a place of their little temples and churches that they used to go to. But all they had left in these camps was a community of Japanese Americans. You know, they had other people with them who shared similar cultural values and similar religion and things like that. So the attitude within the internment camps, where you really have no other options, was just to band together to say, hey, we're Japanese and we're proud of it. You've put us behind fences for being Japanese and you want us to be ashamed, but we're not going to do it. We're not going to be ashamed. We're going to teach our kids Japanese. We're going to, you know, do our Buddhism services, all that stuff. And so basically my mom was never taught Japanese because the pressure that her parents felt, my grandparents, was to prove you're an American by speaking English and, you know, being Christian and stuff like that. Whereas her cousins all learned Japanese. They all went to, like, the cherry blossom festivals and all that stuff, because their parents were like, no, you need to, like, be proud of this because we were shut away forever for for being like this, and you have no reason to feel ashamed of it, you know. And I don't want to give the impression that my grandparents told my mom, I'm sorry, I'm so gibbered, I'm just not talking right, you guys, and it's such a delicate subject, but I don't want to give the impression that my grandparents ever said things like, you should be ashamed of being Japanese. I don't think that was ever necessarily the message, but everyone around my mom and her siblings and her parents was basically saying that. So it's kind of hard to not to not have that rub off on how you just live your life and raise your kids. And, you know, trauma is multi-generational. It's a really weird concept for people to wrap their heads around. Like, we're still in the US seeing the repercussions of the trauma of a lot of Scottish people from like when things were really bad in, like, Glasgow and Edinburgh back in the day when England was just stomping all over Scotland. We're still seeing a lot of the trauma trickling down from that period when a lot of these famished, impoverished, traumatized Scottish people were fleeing from the conflict with the IRA and stuff to America. I won't really get into that stuff because that's a more complicated subject and I need to read more into it, but anyway. Didn't mean to get all serious and historical on you guys, but I don't know, it's just an interesting piece of history. Interesting and also sad, you know, but my mom managed to do her dissertation on it. That was her whole dissertation. And it's 120 pages. It might literally be oh no, I can't ever publish this until everyone. Any other interesting Japanese slang words that I could teach you guys?